to the Institute of World Politics. For those of you that are new, are you all new? Anybody? Everybody been here? New guys. Okay, the new guys. We are a graduate school of national security. So we have 5 degree programs that are master degrees, and we have 18 certificates of study, and we now have a doctoral program as of a couple of months ago. So if you're interested in any of that, please see somebody, a staff member after. Today's presentation is by Dr. Anna Broughel. Did I say that right? Close enough. Okay. And she is a visiting research fellow from the University of Maryland. And she's in the public policy. Come right in. So she has been a postdoctoral fellow at the chair of Management of Renewable Energies at the University of St. Gallen, is that how I said it? Gallen? In Switzerland since 2014. And they actually let her back into the US. So while she was there, she was responsible for the Consumer Barometer of Renewable Energy. And that, I'm sure she'll cover some of that. Her other engagements included international cooperation project with the universities from Switzerland, Estonia, Ukraine, and this was all to improve the energy security in Eastern Europe. Previously, she worked for a large commercial bank in Estonia, a solar research institute in Germany, and at SUNY-ESF and Syracuse University, where she defended her PhD. It sounds like she can't keep a job. Kidding. So anyway, she's very distinguished in her field. She's quite intelligent, which you'll see as she begins. And so please help me in welcoming Dr. Broughel. Now, I apologize, I have to go to a meeting. I'll try and make it back, but no guarantee. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you for having me. I was promised 56 participants, and I'm sure that some of you have signed up 4 or 5 times. This explains it. Otherwise, I'm just blaming everything on the good weather. So it's the first day over 70 degrees. Nonetheless, thank you very, very much for coming, and I hope you will enjoy the presentation. It's based on my empirical work that I did when I was part of the research consortium at the University of St. Gallen in Switzerland, which is one of the best business schools in Europe. I'm going to start by providing a brief overview of energy landscape in these 2 countries. Then we will switch and I will talk about survey results and we'll see what are the energy preferences of the population. Just so that I know whom I'm talking to, by a show of hands, are there any Estonians or Ukrainians in the room? All right. Anyone studying Eastern Europe or Ukraine?
I spent about 2 years in Romania.
All right, well, that counts. Yeah.
I spent 5 months in Armenia, if that counts as Eastern Europe to you.
All right, that can be counted as Eastern Europe, sure. Great, anyone who knows a whole lot about energy? All right, great. So you're going to keep tabs on me, so I'm not going to tell you if anything but the truth. So just to orient ourselves geographically, here we go, here is Switzerland. Here's Estonia up there north, and Ukraine is further down south. You might see that they share the same neighbor on the eastern border. And this fact has contributed to a great degree of angst for both Estonian and Ukrainian media and politicians. There are several reasons why energy security has been a concern for these countries, and I will explain why we're talking today about energy security and wind turbines. It's not very obvious when we when we begin to think about it, it makes sense. So several risk factors in energy supply in Ukraine. First, Ukraine imports natural gas from Russia, and they use it mostly for production of heat, to a lesser extent production of electricity. Second, Ukraine has considerable coal reserves on the east side of the country, which, as we know now, there's a conflict there. So there's been a decline in the production of coal, and the western part of the country does not get enough coal transported. Both of these energy sources are facing increased uncertainty of supply, so the country started thinking about development other domestic sources in the long term, and wind is a strong candidate. Estonia used to be more dependent on Russian gas, but now is facing a slightly different set of challenges. So currently Estonia generates most of its electricity and heat from domestic oil shale and woody biomass. However, the EU has been pressuring Estonia to decrease use of its oil shale since Estonia joined the club in 2004. So onshore and offshore wind energy have been identified as one of the most promising sources to meet energy demand and increase energy security in these countries. So now I'll show you electricity mix in 2016. As I mentioned before, oil shale is the largest piece of the pie. Here is the woody biomass. Wood here, Estonia has a lot of forests. Here we have wind. 10 years ago, this industry didn't exist, so this is all new installations. Electricity from wind has been growing really rapidly. Estonia has committed to producing a quarter of all its energy consumption from renewable energy by 2020, and it has already met its goal. It's over 28%, and now Estonia is engaging in a beneficial trade of renewable energy quotas with Luxembourg. The electricity mix is currently to 16.2% renewable, and Estonia is actually net electricity exporter. So Estonia is connected to other Nordic markets with underwater cable called Estlink, and most of the electricity that is imported to the country is coming from Finland, and export happens to Latvia, which means that electrons are transported from the north to the south through Estonia. However, there is no single electron traded between Estonia and Russia. Something to know. Electricity market is liberalized for end consumers who can, if they choose so, procure 100% renewable energy. Promoted energy means green energy in Estonia. They can print it on the t-shirt, put it as a bumper sticker in the car. Consumers are free to choose their provider and the type of electricity they purchase. However, the TSO, the transmission lines operator, Ellering, is state-owned. As we can see from the statistic, so Estonia joined the EU in 2004. This is consumption of oil shale. It's not going down. So oil shale is still entrenched in the country the same way as coal is entrenched for West Virginians. Estonia has unique deposits of oil shale and one of the most advanced oil shale mining industries in the world. Oil shale is a strategic resource for energy production. Most of the mined oil shale is used to produce electricity, but the average efficiency of these plants is pretty low. It's about 30%. The rest of oil shale is used to produce another type of fossil fuel oil. At the same time, oil shale production is connected to major air pollution. It's a source of CO2 emissions that puts Estonia way up in the per capita emissions rate in the European Union. It uses great amounts of water, and it has left about 1% of the country with these beautiful landscapes pictured there. At the same time, oil shale industry provides an important opportunity for economic growth and employment to about 1% of the population, which is especially important to the economically depressed east of the country on the border with Russia. So I'll tell you a story about ownership. Story that went through the media of Narva Elektrijan, which is one of the major public Estonian electric plants on the border with Russia, that was supposed to be privatized in 2001. There was an American company, NGR Energy, that showed very strong interest, and the deal was supposed to happen. However, it was stopped because, first of all, 9/11 happened, and second of all, there was a high amount of angst over the possibility that this privatized plant, if the NGR goes bankrupt, and it was having some financial troubles at that time. So this plant would be put out on an auction and could have been potentially acquired by the Russian cronies and would end up in the hands of Putin. So Estonian government stopped the deal. This power plant is still public and owned by the public. Let's switch gears and talk a little bit about renewable energy and especially wind in Estonia. So installed capacity of electricity is measured in megawatts. There is a goal to increase that capacity to 400 megawatts of onshore and 200 megawatts of offshore wind, so develop both industries. However, at the moment, there is not a single offshore wind turbine spinning in the country, so this sector still needs to be built up. There is an obligation to connect all wind energy producing plants to the grid so they can sell their electricity to the end consumer. However, at the moment, grid infrastructure is slightly lagging behind, and it cannot accept all the planned wind capacity. So the government developed a plan how to update the grid. Estonian wind producers receive a feed-in premium. Here. This is the amount of money. Euros, more or less. It's a little more expensive than dollar, but you get the idea of how much they get. The deal here is that this is the amount of money that wind electricity producers get on top of the market price. So it's like icing on the cake. And it's capped at 600 gigawatt hour of production per year, which is about 5% of the total electricity production in the country. So you get the idea of how much it is. This cap is renewed every year. So for the first time, this cap was achieved by Christmas 2015. And then by the New Year's 2016, wind energy producers started receiving feed-in premium again. Is that part clear? Okay. Now let's look at Ukraine. Ukraine has considerable coal reserves, and it relies on nuclear power and conventional thermal plants that burn stuff to produce electricity. Hydropower only constitutes 5%, and non-hydro renewables, meaning wind and solar, jointly account for only 1%. However, the goal is to build out renewable energy considerably in the country to reach 12.6% by 2030. And at the moment, I'm not quite sure if this is realistic. This is a realistic target, but this is to be seen. Anyway, much of it will come from wind. The reason is that the country has pretty good wind potential, especially here. So this is the part where Black Sea is. Anyone been in the Black Sea? I spent a lot of my childhood there. So there's 426 megawatts of wind installed in the country. Just to give you the idea of the difference in scale. So Estonia had 331 megawatts, okay? But Estonia is as big as 2 New Hampshires, and it has 1.3 million people. Ukraine is more than 12 times larger than Estonia by size, and it has 43 million people. So the goal of Ukraine is to reach 2.7 gigawatt hours of wind production by 2030 and 3 gigawatts by 2035. Wind energy has great potential. IRENA, which is an international independent agency, estimated that the country could get as much as 27 terawatt hours of electricity from wind, while currently the production is only 1 terawatt hour. It was not a very current number, but the latest statistic I found was for 2015. So if we compare two countries side by side, they have a strikingly similar energy profile. So rated their security, equity, and environmental sustainability, they receive the same grades, A, B, and D. Note that energy security in both countries, despite all of the discussion in the media about potential problems, they're rated rather highly. This is the world ranking, so Estonia is number 22 and Ukraine is number 20 in the world. However, also note that environmental sustainability of these energy sources is rather low. It's a D, and this is the type of dilemma that you face when you're trying to secure electricity demand as a country, but do this through using domestic fossil resources. Both countries have relatively high energy intensities, meaning the energy input that goes into producing 1 unit of their GDP, and the average Ukrainian energy intensity is 3 times higher than average European. And note that Estonian GDP is nearly 3 times larger than Ukrainian. Still, these countries have similar greenhouse gas emission rates per capita. So now let's, this was the overview of the energy landscapes in both countries. Here I'm going to present the results of the online opinion poll, a survey that I conducted at the beginning of last year. I had 1,000 people participate from Western Estonia and Southern Ukraine, and these regions were chosen because of the high wind potential in these coastal regions. So focused on 4 areas. They're all located on the Baltic Sea. And Tallinn is here in Harju, and this is where most of the people live. So 1/3 of the population lives here. This is less populous part of the country. And here we have high wind speeds. As for Ukraine, we also looked at the parts of Ukraine that are on the Black Sea, and they already have some wind parks, which means that it's taking out the hypothetical bias. If a person never seen a wind park, then it might be more difficult for them to have an opinion about it. So now I'm going to present to you just general views of the future of the Ukrainian and Estonian population. So first we asked about how they estimate their future without fossil energy sources. And it looks like majority believe that this is possible. Ukrainians are more optimistic about it, even though they use more renewables, use more fossil in their production. Here we have nuclear power, more or less the same questions was asked about nuclear power. And interestingly, 46% Estonians would agree with that. I would have expected a much higher number because Estonia doesn't have nuclear power. So So at the moment, they already live without it. But I guess the question was interpreted as in general in the world. Here is the wished, desired electricity mix. It looks like Ukrainian respondents would prefer nearly 80% of their energy come from wind or solar, compared to the 1% that is currently, that these technologies currently cover in the electricity mix. And notice the disparity between the desired mix, current production, and the policy goals. So the policy goals for 2030, for 2020 are nowhere close to what the people reported that their desired electricity mix is going to look like. Estonians did acknowledge that they might have more wind resource than solar, which makes sense to me. So I asked about, I tried to figure out, do they know from which resources the electricity comes from? So we asked to tell us which were the first and the second most important sources where what electricity is produced from. And most Ukrainians could name these two, however, a lot of them mixed up the order. So most of them thought that coal was more important than nuclear, but they knew that these are the two major sources. Estonians were pretty clear about fossil, so the oil shale, as I said, is entrenched in the Estonian communities and psyche. So there were, as for the second source, bioenergy and wind was named a lot, which I think were both correct answers because they're very close in percentage at the moment, and wind is growing very rapidly. Probably will take over woody biomass pretty fast. So then I wanted to know general attitudes towards wind energy, and it looks like Ukrainians and Estonians, the majority, very large majority, has pretty acceptance of wind energy. However, it's not a surprise whenever you ask in a public poll about renewable energies, a lot of people will say yes please. However, there will be a qualifier. I will share this later slide. We also asked another question just to be sure the previous question was understood correctly. Is it an important source of renewable energy in Estonia and Ukraine? The answer from the majorities was yes. Now, I was interested in NIMBY. Who knows what NIMBY stands for? Not in my background. Who knows another version of it? It's banana. Alright, so
build any, absolutely nothing near anything.
anywhere against near anything. So NIMBY and banana are very much connected. So here I was trying to investigate how many would agree living in the site of wind turbine. And this is a very strong question because most of the people won't live so close to a wind turbine. So I was surprised to see these numbers. It looks like majority. So if you see that these people are neutral, it looks like there is more green than gray in there. But again, it looks like there are better places for development of wind rather than residential areas. So pretty large majorities agreed that the best place for wind parks to be is near highways, railroad tracks, power lines, so the places that are already developed. Now we presented the question as a trade-off, because you can't have a free lunch. That's the basic lesson in economics. So the trade-off was energy security through domestic supply of wind energy versus changes in the landscape, because wind turbines might not be seen as aesthetically pleasing by some people think they're pretty cool and would even take touristic trips there, as we have seen people in Block Island, the first offshore wind park in the US, have now are now using Block Island as a tourist attraction with people on the boat and with the turbines. So again, if I interpret this graph, I would say that energy supply is a concern because some people want to trade off the untouched landscapes against securing electricity supply. And here, I was investigating the local aspect of wind energy. So we will reduce dependence from abroad if we develop wind energy at home. And again, majorities, and again, Ukrainians are more optimistic about it. We're agreeing with that statement. Again, local economy, because we know that if fossil fuel like oil shale in Estonia or coal mining in Ukraine goes away, we still want to develop these areas, we still want jobs. So majority of the respondents thought that wind energy could contribute to local economies. And again, strong agreement that this resource should be used as much as possible. However, I should have said local resource, because fossil fuels are also local resources, so any local resource should be used as much as possible. Then we designed a beauty contest of a wind project. Based on literature review and focus groups that we conducted, we identified 5 most important factors that characterize a wind project that people cared about. So this is ecological impact, the location, project developer's identity, who this is, the scheme of revenue sharing, some revenue sharing and nothing, and then options for public participation. If energy security is a really big concern, this attribute, this characteristic of the wind project would be ranked as the most important one. However, the real world doesn't work as a ranking. Of course, we want a project that has the lowest impact and is in the industrial zone and so on and so forth. I wanted to know first, what is the ranking of these attributes if they're presented as a trade-off? Because you can't have the best project every time. So we started setting up a joint choice experiment. This is, again, if you think about it as a beauty contest for the best wind project, this is a type of the screen that participants received, and they needed to choose among the projects, and the attributes were generated by the computer, and later the responses were used to figure out what kind of utility levels, utility is like happiness for consumers, were connected to what characteristic or what kind of option. So by the show of hands, which of you think that the developer was the most important characteristic, meaning that there were really, really large fears over energy supply in the country? Anyone? Okay. Which one do you think were the most important characteristics?
Revenue sharing.
Okay. As an economist, I would have thought the same, because these are economically not very developed countries, so I would think that it's important.
I think it's location.
That's a good. That's good thinking. Why do you think so?
Practically every such thing in the U.S. goes by location.
You are right in the sense that in Estonia and Ukraine, ecological impacts and location which I interpret as ecological and landscape impacts of the wind project were the most important characteristic. So these were the first two, and these rankings were consistent also with a third country. We conducted the same choice experiment, Switzerland. So to me, it looks like there are some features of wind projects that are just universally preferred. And these are don't kill the birds and bats, and put it in a location that is already developed, far away from where we live. However, if you look at the project developer's identity, it's still an important attribute. It's ranked number 3 in Estonia and number 4 in Ukraine. However, the difference is just a couple percentage points. Notice that these relative importances add up to 100%. Okay, so on average, every attribute would be 20%. So those that are above 20 are above average important, and those that are below 20 are less important. So what was surprising is that participation, public participation, which receives a lot of media attention, was not one of the most important criteria. It was still important, but not as important as ecological and landscape impacts. So now we'll zoom in to every one of these characteristics, and we will see this in more detail. So ecological impact, rather simple. This axis represents utility. So this is positive utility, this is negative utility. The smaller the impacts, the better. That's how you interpret it. This is the 0 line. Okay, these are low and almost non-existent impacts are connected to positive utility. Now, location. Again, these are pretty consistent preferences across countries. I was very surprised. I thought that they would be pretty different. People prefer projects built on agricultural lands or in industrial and commercial zones. Estonians are very much against wind projects near residential areas, as well as ecologically significant landscapes. Project developers' identity, which could be used as a proxy for our energy security questions. As we expected, foreign energy companies were not specifically liked, especially not by Estonians. Ukrainians, it's close to 0, but it's still a negative number. Best project developers are probably local electric utilities, often owned by the public, or a cooperation between local utility and some kind of outside investor. Estonians were accepting of individuals from the region developing their wind projects, while Ukrainians were slightly skeptical about that. In a similar vein, Ukrainians were slightly skeptical about revenue sharing with private landowners, so with individual landowners. Estonians were more accepting about to this. I guess this is the cultural differences that Estonians embrace individual entrepreneurship and related revenues more than Ukrainians. We'll not know about it. If you're thinking of probably community projects, when people from the community come together and finance the projects themselves. This also happens, but this was not the setup of this experiment. Does this make sense?
Totally private investment, but they will share the part of the revenue to
Yes.
give it to the public.
To the public, exactly. So we were asking, what do you think is the just, fair way of allocating some of the profits?
About the percentage.
So,
How much is the sharing?
so we set up, we connected these numbers to the numbers that are currently revenue sharing in Switzerland and adjusted it for income and purchasing power parity. These are not very large numbers. This would be about $50 per year per household for Estonia, and equivalent of that in Ukrainian hryvnia, in the local currency, adjusted for the purchasing power parity. So $50 even for Estonian households per year is not very much.
How about in terms of percentage of the revenue?
Well, it depends on the wind park. If it's a large wind park, it will have very large revenues. If it's a small wind park, it will have smaller revenues. So I cannot tell exactly how much the percentage is going to be. But we did specify exact numbers, so it's not like unclear how much is the revenue. And it looks like, and the revenue sharing with municipality would be around 50,000. And I think that people thought that with this money you can already do something. As I said, improve school facilities or build something that the community needs. And we can see that revenue sharing with municipality was one of the preferred options too. Make sense? All right, let me try. Hope this works. And for some reason it doesn't. All right, so luckily I'm reaching my conclusions. And I'm sure that you will be all with me, and there were only words on the slides anyway. So I'm through my fun picture slides. So what did I learn from this exercise, and what did you learn with me? That high share of the population in both countries would like to see wind energy developed on national and local level. However, the wind energy projects might be better marketed on environmental grounds, because the both most important attributes in my experiment were environmental and landscape impacts, which are important to minimize in order for the project to be accepted, and this will allow faster building of wind energy, which is a domestic energy resource. We cared about it in the context of energy security. The punchline is to keep projects bird and bat friendly and not disruptive of the landscape. So if you remember my beauty contest of wind energy projects, the winner is the wind energy project that has smallest ecological impact, that is built on agricultural or industrial commercial land, is developed by a utility company alone or with a specialized investor, offers some sort of revenue sharing with municipality or all residents, and allows local population to co-determine the number and location of wind turbines. I'm going to tell you also about the new project that I'm starting. So this one is finished. It's been a world premiere of the results. I'm going to investigate social acceptance of offshore wind off the coast in Maryland and Massachusetts. This is where a lot of projects are planned. So there's only one offshore wind project in the US that I mentioned before. It's Block Island. So a lot of people don't even know how such a project would look like, and we're solving this problem by offering virtual reality experience. We go out to the community where this project is planned. We'll film the landscape, the ocean view, and we'll graphically put planned wind turbines in there and let people interact with them in the virtual reality context, allow them to zoom in and zoom out, and this will also have some audio to see how people interpret the noise and where it comes from, and how do these wind turbines, how aesthetically pleasing or displeasing they're ranked depending on different weather conditions, because they will be more visible in clear summer days rather than not so clear winter days. And you think Massachusetts, I think fog. So we planned a pre-study with Bentley University and their students to happen this year, and hopefully next year we'll work with the communities, and hopefully next year I'll be back here again to present you with the results of this experiment. And I would like to acknowledge my colleagues from University of Gallen who were involved in this study, as well as our project partners in Ukraine at SUNY State University, and my project partners at the University of Estonia. Thank you, and we have time for questions.